Hi everyone, as I stated recently, I'm making a switch to creating more personal and hopefully transformative content, hopefully something more productive than just diagnosing the sorry state of the Western world. One of the key things I speak a lot about on the channel is the value of elders and how it's very sad that the elder relationship between the generations has really disappeared in modernity. That means the wisdom of the tradition isn't being passed on from one generation to the next, and it also breeds into this modern day individualism we have. Now, I'm sure as many people have experienced in recent decades, that individualism can be quite good on the surface. It can be fun, living for yourself, your own pleasures, your own happiness. But in the long run, it tends to degrade the society, the collective, and in the final analysis, the individual as well. But I think there is a silver lining to this. There's gold that we can dig deep to find. And that's in the idea that a lot of the challenges of modernity, a lot of the trials and the pains people go through have a value in there as well. There's a wisdom that can be sourced there. Now, as I said recently on my Substack, I think many of the things I do, not because I'm particularly smart or well-read, but more because of hard experiences, especially in my 20s. I think like many millennials, and this isn't a Diddum story, it's just the reality. We speak about the crisis of meaning in this day and age. Experience what I did. There's a lack of male elders to guide you. Our generation was part of a social experiment by liberals, try and make these feminized men, this free and easy society. And of course that led to many freedoms, but there were trapdoors everywhere. Drugs, hedonism, these sorts of things which could really decay the soul. And as I got older, I realized there really wasn't much spiritual or fatherly guidance for my generation. I think this explains, at least in part, why there was this explosion about a decade ago of the personal transformation, the spiritual transformation content. People like Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, David Goggins, these acted as sort of de facto uncles or father figures to a forgotten generation. Now, I was just about finding my feet by then, but I could understand why a figure like Jordan Peterson was so popular with young men. He was easy to mock by the liberals and the leftists and elements of the right for very simple advice such as clean your room, it'll sort your life out. But as I say, I kind of got it. I realised that while it seems stupid on the surface to tell young men to clean their room, of course they were told that when they were 8 years old, what they were never introduced to when they were growing up was the subtext to all of that. The idea that if you keep order in your personal space, if you try and take personal responsibility for your life, you might find as you start to sort yourself out that you can have a healthy, meaningful and fruitful life. And I think this points towards the real meaning of the age that's been hidden. Unlike the Gen Xers and the Boomers, who you could argue their great mission in life was to make a success of themselves, get out of poverty and hard times, expand their material wealth and have a family, the challenge for millennials and the Zoomers has been more to find a sense of meaning, to find a vitality in life. This goes some way in explaining why Gen Xers and Boomers and Zoomers and millennials are often talking past each other. Boomers and Gen Xers will often say to younger generations, just pull your socks up, crack on with it, work hard. I did. I slaved my guts out and I bought this house and made something of myself. You should do that too. Yet for younger generations, they look at a world where they're very unlikely to own a home. The dating market is increasingly toxic and difficult to navigate. And they have to work for companies that don't really mean anything to them, not to mention their culture is increasingly incoherent and people are coming here from every corner of the earth, making it even harder to find a decent job. And I've often thought when observing Boomers and Gen Xers that they're unaware of a foundation they have that millennials and Zoomers don't. They are part of a British culture. They are the sons and daughters of the war generation, people who were truly, genuinely part of the British tradition. So in essence, there's a sort of solidity there, which I don't think is in generations now. I think that may well explain why we have this crisis of meaning, why there's this mental health crisis going on. And I know, navigating these things myself, that I had to come to the harsh truth that in life adversity is very much your friend. You have to welcome it. It's the only way that your soul is going to grow character. And this is why I think the advice just to pull your socks up is well-meaning and has some value, but it doesn't quite hit the bullseye of what younger generations really need. What they're looking for is a real sense of meaning, to dive deeper into the foundations of life and make sense of who they are. Now, I do believe a lot of our modern maladies can be navigated if we embrace some of the spiritual wisdom we've lost. Things such as one must endure suffering in order to gain wisdom. Healed pain is wisdom, ultimately. That's why we have at the center of the Christian tradition the idea of Christ having to face the devil in the desert. He must face ultimate temptation. He must be challenged to his deepest level. When he overcomes and works through that challenge, he's then, of course, ready to begin his ministry and teach. And it's a tragedy, but the modern church won't tell young men things like this. First of all, it's too tame, and on the one side, they'll just have harsh lessons about not touching your winky, and on the other side is the opposite. They'll have lessons about how Christ would have marched with LGBTQ people at pride marches, swinging dildos around his head. Of course, this is why the church has fallen apart, because it's not saying things that grip men, especially very deeply, stories of death and rebirth, the value of suffering, overcoming darkness and being a leader, a light in the culture. After all, what our society promises as the ultimate peak to aim for is massive material success, wealth, money and fame. But how often have we heard from the people who found those things and say, do you know what, I still felt lonely. I still felt when I got there this didn't complete me. It was fun for a few years, betting all the women, driving the Ferraris. But ultimately I realised this isn't going to answer the call of my soul. It's ultimately because we're prioritising the wrong things as the apex of human life, of meaning. And this of course stems from our materialistic age. So the heart of what we're facing in this day and age is to endure that suffering, to go through the hardships and rediscover that driving force that once inspired our forefathers. Ideally, what this leads to down the line is us becoming the sort of elders that we needed when we were younger. After all, there will be people out there right now that need this sort of wisdom. This is the heart of a collective culture, people who actually work for each other. Yeah, personal responsibility is vital, but it's got to be in the service of growing as one. As the old proverb states, a society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in. If you don't have this, you end up destroying your culture, your tradition, your vitality, the driving force of your civilization. Everything turns to crude modernity and becomes about the self. But we do have a path to overcome this as things start to decay around us. Now, this begins by integrating the challenges of life and becoming the elder that we once needed. There's wisdom there to pass on. Of course, that wisdom shouldn't be forced on other people. They'll just reject it that way. But when the right person is ready, this is how tradition is passed on to the next generation. This is, of course, something I'm trying to build all the more on the Substack, where I'm doing more group work, courses, all sorts of things coming down the line to work on this spiritual development, this transformation, especially for men to find themselves in this day and age and try and reawaken some of these vital things that we've lost. Do check out the Substack down below. You can DM me there if you want to speak about this more, and do let me know your thoughts about this in the comments here, and sub if you're new.